The Detroit Lions travel to the desert this week. In their first away game of the 2024 season, the Lions traveled to play Arizona, a young, tough, scrappy football team that is sure to give them a test this weekend. Now, the Detroit Lions are trying to avoid losing back to back games for the first time since week 7 of 2022. They're looking to improve to 2-1 in the 2024 season. They're looking to get back on their winning track, and they're looking to at least get back up to tied for first place within the NFC North Division. Despite it being a very early game this week, and despite it being a very early game within the season, the Detroit Lions have a lot riding on this game. If you fall to 1-2, your odds of making the playoffs are significantly diminished. Your odds of winning the division are significantly diminished, and your odds of reaching where you want to be are not going to be as easy to attain. So winning this week is pretty crucial for the Detroit Lions. They have a tough schedule coming up over the next month, and a win in Arizona could really be a momentum swinger as they go to Dallas, as they welcome Seattle, as they welcome some really, really strong teams into their house. A win this week could be a massive jumping point for the Detroit Lions this season. However, going into week 3 versus Arizona, the Detroit Lions have quite a few injuries, and they have quite a few players that might not play in Arizona this weekend, whether it be due to illness, whether it be to concussion, and whether it just be to injuries sustained during the week. There are players that are not going to travel to Arizona that will leave a mark and will leave a gap within the offense and the defense for the Detroit Lions. And going up against a super hot Arizona Cardinals team, a great offensive showing last week, and going against, of course, Kyler Murray and that explosive offense, the Lions really need all hands on deck to win this matchup. So today, we're going to talk about the injury report for both sides, the impact that it's going to have on the Lions offense and defense, as well as the Arizona Cardinals offense and defense, and talk about how these injuries are going to affect the game. So, with that being said, let's start off with the players that have yet to practice this week for the Detroit Lions. And unfortunately for them, it is in a secondary that has already been struggling this year. Terrion Arnold has missed the first 2 days of practice this week with an illness. He has been sick. He has not been in the building. He has not been on the field. There is a chance that he does still travel to Arizona. There is 48 hours between now and kickoff on Sunday, and there is a chance that he is going to play, right? Players all the time miss a couple practices with illness and then end up being okay for the actual game. That is very possible, and that is, I think, what the Detroit Lions are hoping for. Aaron Glenn has made a couple of comments saying that he really hopes that Terrion Arnold can get a couple good hits in on Marvin Harrison Jr. and stuff like that. So I think that the idea around the building is that this is not going to be an illness that affects Terrion through Sunday. But of course, you never know. Illnesses stick around. Illnesses are going to hinder you. And of course, if you're sick, you're not going to be able to play in the NFL, right? So the Detroit Lions could very well be short-staffed in the cornerback room, and it doesn't help that the guy behind Terrion Arnold, and it's Rakestraw Jr., is also likely out with a hamstring injury suffered in warm-ups of week 2 before the Buccaneers game, and it's Rakestraw ended up hurting his hamstring within 10 minutes of the Detroit Lions kicking off versus Tampa Bay. He was immediately put on the Detroit Lions do not dress. He was immediately put on the inactives for the week, and he is yet to practice through week 3's preparation. He has been dealing with this hamstring injury. He's been rehabbing with the Detroit Lions, but it seems very unlikely that he will be able to go versus the Arizona Cardinals, and seems very unlikely that he will be able to travel. And if 2 secondary members being out wasn't bad enough, Ifeatu Melifonwu is also missing time this week yet again. After an ankle injury suffered in Kansas City in week 2 of the preseason, the Lions have not seen Ifeatu Melifonwu play in a game or really participate in much practice this year. He has been suffering with this ankle injury. He's been suffering through really a month of football at this point, and we have yet to see his return. Now, Ifeatu has yet to be placed on injury reserves, which means there's a good chance that he is ready to go by next week. But the Lions are known for bringing along their players slowly, known for taking injuries very seriously, being a little extra cautious with the players that they have on their roster. And I do think there's a good chance that 2, if not all 3 of these secondary members will not make the trip to Arizona, which is quite scary because that means obviously in the safety duo, you still have Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch, but that means that you have to have Amik Robertson on the boundary, meaning your slot cornerback is either Brian Branch coming into the slot with Brandon Joseph as a starting safety, or having maybe Amik Robertson stay in the slot, but then having to force Khalil Dorsey or, you know, the other guy on that roster, Kendall Vildor, to be the starting boundary cornerback, right? For a secondary that was supposedly really, really deep, now being without two of their top guys, it's really going to hurt them. And they're going to be down to their fifth string cornerback going into Arizona if Terrion is unable to play due to illness. Now, taking a look at some of the other players that were limited in practice this week, Alex Anzalone has been limited with a concussion. He was missing practice entirely on Wednesday, was limited in practice on Thursday, and is expected to be back at practice today on Friday. There's a good chance that Alex Anzalone does travel to Arizona and play. Concussion protocol is a very serious thing within the NFL. They are extremely cautious to put players back on the field. And again, with the Detroit Lions being one of the more cautious franchises, with Dan Campbell really taking the health of his players seriously, if it was a massive issue, I don't think they would play Alex Anzalone this week. I think if there was any true concern that Alex was still suffering those symptoms and suffering from that concussion, that he would not be playing and would not be practicing. The fact that he is limited in practice this week, I think, is a very good sign. And there's a good chance that Anzalone will play versus the Arizona Cardinals. Graham Glasgow is the same way. Suffered a knee injury in the second quarter of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game and was able to finish it out. He did allow quite a few pressures and probably had his worst game of the season and really over the last two seasons. But again, with a major knee injury suffered halfway through the game, that is to be expected. Your performance will probably not be as good. And he was able to finish out the game, which is a really good sign. I do think he will be able to play throughout the game on Sunday in week 3 versus Arizona. He's been limited all week, but he has been out there. He has been practicing. And again, within 48 hours, there's a chance that he still has some more time to recover, still has some more time to, get his legs back under him. And I do believe that Graham Glasgow will be playing as well, making sure the offensive line is not a hindrance or a weakness. Isaiah Williams, after missing the game last weekend with an abdominal injury, has been limited in practice. His absence forced the Detroit Lions to call up two wide receivers from the practice squad, that being Tom Kennedy and Tim Patrick. If Isaiah Williams is able to go this week, I think the Lions likely only call up one wide receiver, that probably being Tim Patrick, with the option to maybe call up another safety, maybe call up another cornerback like Stephen Gilmore, or just in general have the options to have some extra depth within the secondary because of the injuries sustained this week. And then we get to the exciting part, the full practice players that started on the injury report and have been fully go and ready to participate in practice. Marcus Davenport, after missing week 2 with a groin injury, has been fully practicing this week, not limited, not, out for any reason. He has been fully go at practice and is expected to play in week 3. Kirby Joseph, after being put on the injury report after last week's game, is fully healthy at practice, suffering through a back injury, but will play and is fully practicing. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, the quad injury that he suffered at the very end of week 2 was a big hindrance in their final 2 drives. They missed him on those drives, and he had a great game last week, right? 11 receptions, 119 yards through the air. He is still this team's wide receiver 1, and when he is on the field, this Lions offense is significantly better, and when he's gone, they are significantly worse. There's a good chance that he plays this week. It was said right after the game that this is not going to be a long-term injury, so the Detroit Lions will have their wide receiver 1, their safety 1, and their edge rusher 2 likely going into this game, unless, of course, knock on wood, something awful happens within this last day of practice. Overall, the Lions are pretty healthy, right? Outside of the secondary, they're getting back Marcus Davenport, who was incredible in week 1. They're getting back Amon-Ra St. Brown, and they're not going to miss him too much this year, right? Obviously, being healthy, they're not going to miss too much time from him. Overall, the Lions are pretty healthy. I think their questionable guys are likely to play. Their full practice guys are almost definitely going to play. And I think even their DNPs, I think even one of their did not practice, that being Terrion Arnold, has a chance to go as well. And if that is the case, I would say the Lions are pretty close to 100%, right? It sucks to not have the depth of Ifeatu Melifonwu. It sucks to not have the depth in the special teams help from Ennis Rakestraw. But with that being said, if Terrion Arnold is good to go, I do think this Lions team will be pretty close to full health going into Arizona. And I do think despite their depth might not being so, good this week, right? Despite their depth not being nearly as deep as it has been in weeks past, their starters are going to be 90% out there. And I think they will be ready to go in Arizona. Now, taking a look at the opposition this week, a couple players that have been very limited at practice. Dante Stills has been limited with a shoulder. Kelvin Beckham has been injured and limited with a hamstring injury. And Xavier Thomas has missed practice due to personal reasons. I do believe that all three of these players will play for the Arizona Cardinals this week. And then they have a couple of full practice guys with Will Hernandez and Xavier Weaver. The Arizona Cardinals are nearly 100% healthy. I do not expect any of their players to miss game due to injury, and I expect them to be at full health in the desert this weekend. So, with that being said, how do the Detroit Lions match up? Did the Detroit Lions have an okay shot at winning this game, or are they at serious risk of falling to 0-2? Personally, I think there's a real risk this week. I think Arizona is a very tough, very scrappy football team. They play good offense. And even though I don't think their defense is super talented at every single level, they do play very hard. Buda Baker is really good. Their secondary has been more impressive than I thought they would be this year. They are maybe not as talented as the Detroit Lions, but they remind me a lot of year one Detroit with Dan Campbell, right? Where, yeah, they might not be the most talented roster. They might not have any all pros. They might not have any pro bowlers, but they're going to play tough defense. They're going to be super scrappy, and they're going to be in a dogfight every single week, regardless of if they're playing the Carolina Panthers or the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Whether or not they win this game, I think is yet to be determined. I think the Lions are a better roster. I think they are better constructed. I think they are better coached. But I do think Arizona is a scrappy team. I do think they are a very good football team. I think that they will give the Detroit Lions a fight. And I do think there's a good chance that the Lions do go into Arizona and they walk out 1-2. Now, with that being said, I do think the Lions are a better football team. I do think they should win this game. And again, the statistic is still alive that the Detroit Lions have not lost back-to-back games since week 7 of 2022. They typically come out after a loss very hungry, very ready for victory, and they usually attain it. So with that being said, that is my updates. That is the injury report for the Detroit Lions versus Arizona Cardinals. Let me know down in the comments below your opinions of these injuries, how impactful that they are going to be, and what this game is going to look like for the Lions. With all of that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.